Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I had a really weird experience about 3 months ago while driving home. I had to move my mom from Minneapolis to Madison, Wisconsin, and I was driving home on one of my trips, moving her stuff alone. It was about 1 a.m. and I was in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't in a town or anything, and I was really tired because I had been driving all day, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I distinctly saw a person running out of the woods straight towards the side of my car. I was going about 65 and I thought, okay, I've been driving too long and now I'm seeing things. All of a sudden, smack into the side of my car. I was terrified. It was pitch black out there was no traffic. There's nobody around and there's nothing near me. I was just in the middle of nowhere. This came out of the woods. It ran into the side of my car. My car was dented. It hit me so hard. Out of the corner of my eye, I was really tired, so I don't know what it was I saw, but I could have sworn it was on 2 legs and it was probably about 6 feet tall or taller. In the corner of my eye, what I thought I saw was a man wearing a gray sweatshirt and a hood. I was too scared to stop. I was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't understand why someone would come out of the woods and run straight into my car when there's no traffic or anything. If they needed to cross the street, why would they wait until there was a car coming? So I thought I should call the police. Then I thought, what did I just see? What was that? What do I say to the police? That somebody darted out of the woods and ran into my car? So I drove home. I was probably about 30 or 40 minutes away and I was shaking. I was scared. I don't know what had just happened to me. I got out to see if there was damage to my car. I thought about calling the police and I decided it had to be an animal because there was nothing around there. So the next day I looked in the papers and I looked through everything to see if there were any dead bodies in the road because that would have made the news, and there wasn't, nothing. So I don't know if it was an animal or what it was. Another thing that was terrifying was that it was running very fast, very fast. That's why I thought it couldn't have been a person. I knew not to stop. I was going about 65. No blood. No hair. I checked for blood because I thought maybe I hit somebody. No blood, but you can see the dent. It's on the driver's side of the car. That's where it smacked into me. You can definitely see the dent, but it wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. You can see it, but it wasn't like serious damage to the car or anything.
This happened, it was in the early 80s, I believe. I had a beautiful black Labrador named Max. I lived down by the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. A nice neighborhood on the side of a hill. One morning, I let Max out and he took off and he didn't come back. We had to go over to my mother's house for brunch. It was a holiday, either Christmas or Thanksgiving, I believe. So I went out and looked for him but couldn't find him, so we went to our mother's. We came back in the afternoon. I went out and drove around looking for him and I couldn't find him, so we went to bed that night. He was gone, so I didn't think he was ever going to come back. Well, we had a grandfather's clock that chimes on the hour every hour, and at midnight, I heard a knock on the door and then the doorbell rang, so I got dressed. I went down and there's a guy standing there in a long overcoat, big hat, and he's got Max on a leash. Oh, that's Max.
Yeah, I found him.
He just kinda mumbled and he never looked at me. He looked away from all the time and he had a big hat on, a big brimmed hat. Well, where did you find him?
He was across Hennepin Avenue.
How did you find my house?
Well, he led me back here.
He had him on a leash and I said, "Can I give you some money or reward?" He said, "No," and he unhooked him from the leash and gave him back to me. I call him the dog angel. He just turned around and walked down the steps and disappeared. This was at midnight, the stroke of midnight. It was just a very strange situation. We got Max back and he never wanted anything. He never gave me a name, never said anything else, just turned around and walked away. How did that dog get across Hennepin Avenue without getting hit by a car and leading him back to my house at midnight? And who would go out looking for an owner of a dog at midnight? It was just very, very strange. He never looked at me. I never saw his face, so I thought, this is very strange. So I call him the dog angel.
So it was like, I guess 82 or 83 or 84. I don't know what year it was. I worked for a construction company and they sent me over to the Missouri River because they sunk a crane in the river. So they sent me with this big block and tackle in the back of the truck. No big deal, but it was kind of weird when I got there. It was kind of like an Indian reservation. Nobody was there. It's hard for me to explain, but it was desolate. Anyway, People finally showed up and they unloaded the thing, and on my way home, I saw this dead cow. Now I've told this story before. This cow was laying on its back, feet sticking straight up. I thought that was pretty weird because I've never seen anything like that. So I'm driving down the road and this guy comes driving by me in this old truck and he just gave me this look. This was the look of death. And I thought, wow, that was pretty weird. Next thing I know, he drove past me with the cow in his truck. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, how can that be? I'm still driving down the road. And, I don't know what to tell you, but that guy passed me with that damn cow in the back of his truck. That's all I can tell you. At the end, my time card showed 14 hours missing. I just figured. The reason was, I had to time out when I got there, and when I timed out, it was 14 hours. I don't know where the 14 hours went. I don't know where this guy came from with the cow. He put it in his truck and he drove past me with this same weird look on his face. I mean, he looked at me weird.
I was walking west on 45th Avenue in Plymouth, Minnesota, which is a western suburb of Minneapolis. The time was approximately 8:30 p.m., November 1990. I was lonely, I was depressed, and I was cold. Suddenly, I found myself standing in a beam of very white light, almost like standing under an overhead spotlight on a stage. I looked up and was blinded by the source. I looked down, shielded my eyes with my hand, and looked up again, this time with my hand blocking the source of light. I saw the silhouette of a large black disc about 25 feet in diameter with an aperture in the center. The object was slightly north of me, hovering silently above the ground about 30 or 35 feet. The beam was emanating from the aperture. It moved into a position immediately over me, and I recall a deep voice coming from all around me. I didn't really say any words, but it had the feel of a voice. Then, I somehow was lifted off the ground and began floating towards the light. The chronology of my recollections ends here, but I remember laying flat on a table or bench with a pair of eyes looking at me from head to toe and back again. The next thing I remember, I found myself walking east on 45th Avenue. I was relaxed, warm, and surprisingly very happy. Figuring it took me only another 5 or 10 minutes to run home, and considering that I arrived home just after 11 p.m., I cannot officially account for about 2 hours and 20 minutes of that evening. I'm not sure I believe it all myself, but that is what I remember. And since I am a firm believer in extraterrestrials, I am beginning to think that maybe something did really happen and I didn't just imagine all of this. However, recently the dreams have been turning into nightmares, and I think I am afraid to undergo hypnosis and verify any of my recollections.
I had a hat man experience in downtown Minneapolis. It's probably early June, maybe the end of May of this year. I leave work in the evening, usually around 7:30. You know, full daylight. There was I can say it, it was the Leamington parking ramp, you know, 3rd and 10th. I went into the lobby. I got on the elevator. I was the only person in the lobby at that hour, and the elevator doors closed, and then it was like they were interrupted, like somebody was trying to get in with me. I stopped it and I looked around and there was absolutely nobody there. I had a perfect view of the buttons and nobody was around. And all of a sudden this head and shoulders leaned in around the corner, with a hat, just shadow, it looked at me and it was like perfectly eye level. And then it leaned back out and then it was gone. Then the doors closed and I was standing there thinking, what just happened?
When I was leaving the Minneapolis Veteran Hospital one morning, I turned right out of the parking lot just past the train tracks, and there was a bicyclist riding in the same direction down the sidewalk about 30 yards ahead of me. I almost crashed when I saw a completely brown bird take off from the grassy area between the veteran parking lot and the sidewalk in front of the cyclist. Not because of the bird's proximity or speed, but because the bird was about twice the size of the man and his bicycle combined. It flew from one side of the street to the treetops on the other side and was lost from view after that point. Probably 5 seconds of total encounter time. When I looked into the sighting, someone mentioned to me that there was a condor aviary in Minneapolis, but I couldn't seem to find any evidence of such a place online. As a hunter and avid outdoorsman, it's nearly unthinkable for wildlife to startle me in such a way, but this bird's sheer size left me awestruck. I've seen bald and golden eagles at various stages of development, and this bird easily dwarfed even the largest specimen I've ever seen. As far as I'm concerned, this mystery is still unsolved.
I'll never forget the night of August 14, 2021. I was fishing the river with my friend in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. We loved coming to this public park to fish because it was quiet and there was a nice sandbar to fish from. This park had a Sioux burial mound about a half-mile from our spot. After fishing for a better part of the day, we decided to leave at dusk. In order to get back to our vehicles, we had to take a trail through the woods, which was about a 5-minute walk. I put a clip-on light on the bill of my hat so we could see the trail. I remember when I first glanced ahead down the trail, I saw 2 circular white lights that I assumed were fireflies. Once we got further down the trail, we were closer to the area where I had seen the fireflies. It was then that I saw a pair of eyes that were either highly reflective from my light or glowing white. It wasn't long before I could make out a body. It was a very large white body on 4 legs, bigger than a wolf but unnaturally skinny. I couldn't make out any facial features because its eyes were so bright. I wanted to warn my friend, but all I could manage to say was, "There's something there." We had no choice but to proceed because this was the only way back to our vehicles. This thing just stared us down but didn't make a sound. My friend yelled at it to try and scare it away, but it didn't react at all. I yelled at it after she did and it responded back mimicking my voice. I honestly questioned myself and thought I was imagining things. So I yelled at it again and it responded back at the same volume, same pitch, exactly like my voice. At this point we realized this was not an animal. We both continued on the path in silence, but I maintained eye contact with the creature. I felt like this thing was ready to attack us at any moment, but it just stood there staring. Eventually, we were out of the woods and I could no longer see its eyes. We made it back to our vehicles and felt a sense of relief. I asked my friend, "Did you hear that talk back to me?" She said she did and it sounded like my voice when it responded back to us. If she hadn't heard the voice, I would have assumed I imagined it. We went over what happened and our stories were the same, except she said the creature had a wolf-like head. After our experience, my friend, who is native Hmong, went to see a shaman. The shaman believed it was an evil spirit and performed a cleansing on her. She was still shaken up by the experience for several weeks. I tried to hire a spiritual advisor online, but when I described the experience and asked for a spiritual cleansing of my own, it said they were not available at this time. At the advice of one of my friends, I burned some tobacco and said a prayer that the entity would leave me alone. It took me several months to just feel normal again, but I still think about it on a weekly basis. I tried to do further research and contacted the management at the park. They said the park we went to had ancient native remains scattered along the river that were unmarked. They said there were more native remains in that park than any other parks they managed. I contacted several Native American friends and was told the entity we encountered was a skinwalker. I know skinwalkers are part of the Navajo culture, but from what I read, it checks more of the boxes more than any other supernatural being or cryptid.
This happened the night after Halloween. I delivered newspapers at night and I was delivering newspapers that night and it was business as usual. I rounded this curve and I saw a group of kids in the middle of the road. There were about 6 of them and they were all wearing gray robes with hoods. They didn't have the hoods on, they were down their backs. I thought that was kind of strange because Halloween had ended about 10 hours before that. One of them saw me and started walking very quickly towards my car saying something. She got very close to my car and I could see that she was about 15 years old, and my first thought was, why was she out there? That's pretty young to be out there at that time of night. It was about 4:30 in the morning. I didn't have time to talk to her, so I drove around her, but then there were the other 5 kids in the middle of the road, and then they saw me and they fanned out to surround my car so I couldn't move, and that scared me. I drove up on the lawn to get around them, but they were coming pretty quickly at my car and I almost hit one of them, and then I thought, I'm gonna call the police because this is quite odd. Then I thought, I better follow them so I could tell the police what they're doing. I saw them turn down this street and I turned to follow them, and it took about 10 seconds to get to this street and they were gone. They had disappeared and there's no way they could have gone to even the first house.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I will share my story for the first time, here and now. When I was 10, I had the most traumatic experience of my life. I will never forget it. I was living in a suburb of Minneapolis at the time. It was an extremely hot summer day in August. I was running around with friends in the neighborhood playing tag when I noticed a huge grasshopper or locust clinging to the side of my house. I was an odd child. I used to capture insects and do experiments on them, so you can understand how excited I was to see such a big insect within my grasp. I captured the thing and remember thinking it strange how it didn't struggle in my hands. It was super chill even when I threw it in the bathroom sink I had filled with water. I grabbed my notepad to take notes and a bunch of household cleaners we had stored in the cupboard below the kitchen sink. I added a bit of bleach or something and things started going crazy. After I had put the chemicals back in their place, I went into my bedroom to place the notepad back in the drawer of my nightstand. The second I entered the room, I saw that damn thing I had just tortured and flushed down the toilet chilling on my little nightstand. I did a double take and sure enough it was there. I approached slowly to examine the insect. When I grabbed the thing between my index finger and thumb, the weirdest thing happened. Imagine there is a piece of fabric on the palm of your left hand. It represents the fabric of space and time. Now take your right hand and pinch a piece of that fabric between said fingers and then invert it or pull it inside out so that the bottom of the fabric is now on top. When I grabbed that thing, it was as if all of reality had flipped inside out, though. I was a part of that fabric. The fact that I was an observer only created the illusion that I was separate or outside of what I was perceiving around me. Instantly, I was on my back and paralyzed. Standing over me, one to my left and one to my right, were two very white and taller aliens. Keep in mind, at that point in my life I had never seen the classic, stereotypical image of an alien. It wasn't until I was 13 when I saw the cover of a book titled Communion that I realized that what had tormented me that day were aliens. They had the same big head and huge black eyes as the creature on the cover of that book, except that they were tall and very white, and not the little gray aliens most people describe under hypnosis. Anyway, the two extraterrestrials or demons or whatever placed the palm of their hands over my rib cage, and what I experienced at that moment I can only describe as raw terror. It was absolute terror. Electric terror. I couldn't breathe or move or even blink. I couldn't tell you how long it lasted or what happened after. I have no recollection of its ending. I didn't come into my bedroom or anywhere for that matter. That was it. What I did later that day or who I talked with about the experience is unknown to me. All I know is that from that moment on I have been a different person. It was the defining moment of my life. A year or so ago, I got a little buzzed and called my dad to talk. I asked him something I had wanted to ask him for years but never had the courage to do so because I didn't really want to know. I asked him if he or mom ever noticed anything strange about me when I was a child, if I had said anything about what I was going through, as I had always suffered from what I can only describe as being severe night terrors. I was afraid to go to bed. In fact, it had a severe impact on my youth. What my dad said actually caused me to start hyperventilating and I had to end the phone call. He reluctantly said that, yes, they had noticed something very strange and had even had me exorcised, even though neither my mom or dad are religious at all. I was also the subject of extensive neuropsyche testing at the University of Minnesota. In hindsight, it all made sense. I remember the doctors and scientists. They even came to visit me at my elementary school on a daily and then weekly basis. My dad simply said that he would describe what he was witnessing as being almost alien. That was the word that brought on my panic during that phone call. I had to hang up. What makes this so compelling to me is the fact that I had never been into science fiction or aliens or mythology. In fact, I thought it was downright stupid. I became a hardcore materialist reductionist scientist later in life. I rejected everything I had had personal experience with for many years. It was as if I was in denial. I was in denial. I am just now trying to reconcile this experience and others of a more supernatural nature. The experience I described here was the first and last experience I had involving extraterrestrials. As far as I know. I am now 38. I have severe PTSD and have undergone multiple series of electro-convulsive therapy. I have been hospitalized numerous times over the years for major depression and PTSD. I cannot for the life of me understand why I have PTSD, but I am considering the possibility that there is more going on than I am conscious of. There is something anomalous about me, a quality or ability if you will, that I have never shared nor will I ever share. I know better than to share such things with psychiatrists or therapists. The eyes cannot see what the mind does not know.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.